Hello, thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to walk you through how to use Excel to summarize student level SOAR data. So in this video, the intention is that viewers will have their OASIS SOAR information up. I'll walk you through how to use SOAR to pull down an Excel spreadsheet, and then we will use step-by-step directions on how to go into Excel and create a summary table or a pivot table for your use. Now, before we start, what we need to do is just talk about what to think about before we go into either one of those tools. So, first thing we need to think about is what data do you want to summarize? What's your data question? If you're interested in absenteeism, if you're interested in maybe some summary of FastBridge data, NC check-ins, survey data, all of that is available, or grades, all of that's available in SOAR. So the first thing you need to think about is what data you want to summarize. And once you determine what data that is, you have to think about the data type, because how we build our pivot table is reliant on what the data type is that will be in the inside of the data table. There's two types of data. One is categorical, so that might be like in EOGs, the level non-proficient, level 3, level 4, level 5. That's a category. That might go on the inside of your pivot table, and that might be the data you want to summarize. Another option might be FastBridge data, on track, etc. And some numerical data might be, say, your NC check-in percent correct, or your number of days absent. Sometimes numerical data doesn't lend itself to averages, but typically that's what we think about. Some data in there is not really meant to be average, such as average student absence number, but that's where you might filter or sort to get the same information you want out of your SOAR data. So once you identify the data you want to summarize, you also need to think about how you want it summarized. That's usually a categorical field, such as maybe you want to consider summaries by different EL statuses, or by different ethnicities, or by different grades. Those are some other categorical data that is easily summarized by numerical data. So sometimes they do cross. But the goal is you have your data question, you think about what your categories are and what you want to summarize. And then you kind of want to know what the table looks like. I'm going to show you some of these. So as we go through the rest of this video, we're going to walk through how you pull some numerical data, an example of some numerical data out of SOAR, and how to then summarize it, and then how to pull categorical data out of SOAR and how to summarize it. So first, we're going to talk about a numerical data summary. This is a pivot table. This is what we'll be building. So in just a moment, we're going to go into SOAR, we're going to pull this data, and then we're going to go step by step in Excel, hopefully so you can just follow along and create something very similar to this. And when you think about what you want your pivot table to look like, it's very important to figure out what categories do you want to summarize the data by. In this case, I selected ethnicities. So you'll have to consider what you want in the rows. So this is a row, so this row applies to the Asian students in your school. This row is the Black African American students in your school, Hispanic students, etc. So the first thing you need to think about is, what do you want your row categories to be? Once you figure that out, you want to think about what our column categories need to be. In this case, I pulled NC Check-in A for the ELA and NC Check-in A for your math. So these are values that we are going to average in today's demonstration. They could be any type of numerical data, and you don't have to average it. You could look for minimums, maximums, you could look at counts or sums. Those are all things. But today, we're going to talk about these two numerical categories, and we're going to take some averages. I also have another category at the top that might be helpful, so I decided to toss that in, and that's a filter at the top. Sometimes we just have to build one pivot table, and we can change the values based on another category, like grade level. So this is exactly what I'm going to show you today. So we are going to go ahead and hop over and show you how to pull your Excel data sheet out of Oasis, out of the SOAR application. If you're familiar with this, you might be able to fast forward to actual working in the Excel. But if you're not familiar with this tool, I'm just going to show you real quick how to pull that data. In your Wake ID portal, you should have an icon called Oasis. I think most of you are familiar with that. If you do not, you can add the Oasis app by clicking on this plus sign. So we're going to go into Oasis. The tiles on your screen will probably look different as they are customized to the person using it. But we're going to go into Dears. So find the tile that says Dears, D-E-A-R-S. And once you're in Dears, you're going to see a couple report options. One is a teacher report. So if you are a teacher and you want to summarize just information about your students, you can select this option. But most of our listeners today are going to be school level folks. So you also have school reports. Notice most teachers only can see the teacher reports. So we're going to click on the school reports option. When you do so, again, many tiles will appear in the middle. We are going to find the one that says Student Rosters. All right, these options might look different to you as well. Up at the top, I'm going to have to select a school. Please note, the school I select here does not correspond with the data I'm going to show you in a moment. So I have to click on a school, but your school should be presented at the top. We're going to go down here to this option that says Student Overview Ad Hoc Report SOAR. So it's this one right here. And we're going to click on the diskette to the right. When we do so, there are options. I'm going to undo that. SOAR will maintain your previous selections. So I had been in here once already today, so I had to take those off. You may or may not have to do that. So when you click on that diskette, you're going to get some options. For this demonstration, we're talking my data questions about NC check-in data. So I don't need all of my grade levels. You could, if you choose not to select any of these, all the students or your school will appear, and that's fine too. But since I happen to know my data question is specific to NC check-ins, I'm going to go ahead and select grades 3, 4, 5. So those are the only students that will appear in my data. So you can select whichever ones make sense for you and your school, or none. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is click this arrow to the right of the demographics. This gives us all the options for our demographic data. What we're doing is we're building a spreadsheet where row by row we have student information. It is always good to select student ID, student first name, student last name, so that you know what data corresponds to what student. This is a common mistake. The other thing we're going to need is grade level, because even though we selected grade level up here, what we're selecting here is actually what will appear in your Excel spreadsheet. So we will need grade level. We will also need our category to which we want to summarize. And in this example, it's ethnicity, race. There are other categories here that may be useful, such as LEP, SP group, which is your students with disabilities groups, and perhaps AIG, maybe track. There's lots of different options if this were a multi-track school. So these are just demographics. Now our data question involves NC check-ins. NC check-ins will be under the testing option. So I'm going to click on testing. And as you can see, there are lots of things in here to include any historical EOG data. I'm in an elementary school, so only EOGs are appearing. Oh, and some EOCs. Extend 1, but all the way at the bottom, we have those fields that correspond to my data question. I want to summarize NC check-in data. So I will select the NC check-in A ELA and the NC check-in A math. Those will give us those two fields that we were interested in our example. If you're interested in a different NC check-in report, please feel free to check that. At the bottom, you then click Get Report. When you do so, you will either go up to your upper right-hand corner and you will be able to select the download from there, or go to your downloads folder in your computer. But when you click Get Report, you will get a spreadsheet that looks something similar to this. Of course, I have this de-identified, but you should have your actual student list. And you'll see your grade that we selected, your ethnicity that we selected. This is a little difficult to read, so a little trick I like to do is if you click on this little box, little triangle to the left of A column, that will select everything on your spreadsheet. Then if we go over a little bit and wait for your cursor to become an up and down line like that and double click, everything pops out so that you can see everything a little bit nicer. This just helps me organize and make sure I have the data that I want. Now, believe it or not, the hard part's over. Now we're going to create our pivot table. So once again, I want to select all my data. Well, the shortcut way to do that is to click on this little triangle to the left of the A column. And you see everything is selected. We can then go up to the Insert option and click on Pivot Table. When you do that, a dialog pops up, and at first it asks you to select your table range. You don't have to do that because, as you notice, we've already selected our data, and there's a nice dotted line that goes around our data. Then it decides, do you want it in an existing worksheet or a new worksheet? I often like to put my pivot tables in a new worksheet, so we'll do that today. That just means a new tab will open up and we'll have a nice clean slate like that. So once you're here, we're almost done. As I talked about earlier, first you need to think about what goes in the row. We'll notice there's 4 little boxes to the right under your pivot table fields, and one of them is rows. So in our example, we put ethnicity, race as our rows. Now if you look over here to the main part of our spreadsheet, you'll see just by doing that, it has populated all your ethnicities in your rows, ready to go, ready to figure out what data you want to populate the rest of your table. We also am going to add grade level as a filter. Notice there's a filter box in your pivot table fields. So up here, we have our grade level, and we'll be able to filter according to what grade level we want. We'll show you that in just a minute. Now the final thing we're going to do is we need to fill out the middle. We need to know what values we want. So over here, we see NC check-in A, ELA % correct. That was that first column in our example. I'm going to move that down to my values pane of our pivot table field. When I do that, we'll see that our table now has values. But wait, those don't look like percents. You're right, they are not. If we look up here, we say this says the sum. So this is the sum of all the values for those students. You're like, that is not what we need, but it's easy to change. Let's go back over to our pivot table fields option over on the right. We're going to click on our down arrow. When we do that, we're going to select value field settings. This allows you to modify what those values come in as. And when you click on that, we'll see there's a sum, there's a count, there's an average. Oh, there you go. So if we click on average, click OK, those values are now our average percent correct for those groups. To get rid of those never-ending decimals, I'm going to show you another trick. If we go up to Home, and under the Number option in your toolbar, you'll see these little movement zeros. But if you click on this one that goes 2 to 1, we will reduce and it'll round to eventually get us a percent correct that is a single digit. I'm just going to go ahead and center that in my field. So what we've just done is we've created, and we say Asian students at this school, the average percent correct in the NC Check-In A ELA was 58. So that, and for the whole school, was 60. So that helps you see the summary of our NC Check-In A ELA percent correct by ethnicity. Now in our sample, we had another column and we included the NC Check-In A Math. When I clicked on the pivot table, notice my pivot table fields showed back up. So all we need to do here is we take this NC Check-In A Math percent correct option, and we're just going to scoot it right down here in the Values pane. And notice that has appeared in our table. Notice also that it's the sum again. So to fix that, we do it the exact same way. We come over here, we click on the little down arrow, we click on Value Field Settings, and we select Average. And there it is. Now we haven't messed with the grade level yet. This currently is all grade levels. So if we want to just look at one grade level, say third grade, we select third grade, and your pivot table changes to accommodate only third grade. You can do that repeatedly for other grade levels. You can copy and paste this table to another document. You would need to paste values or just transfer that information. But you can copy and paste values into another sheet if you need to. So let's go back to our example of a categorical summary. So these are, we're going to again think about our rows. In this case, we're going to keep our ethnicities. Again, you could choose any number of categories that students are sorted into in the SOAR data files. But in this case, notice our columns are based on FastBridge data. So these are the categories that we will see reported out in our FastBridge data in SOAR: high risk, low risk, on time, and some risk. And this is the A reading risk level. In the middle, we have our percents. So in this case, it's not an average, it's not a count or a sum, it's a percent. And we'll talk about how to fit that in your pivot table in just a minute. So you are going to have to determine if you want the percent of the row, which I have here because each row equals 100%, or if you want percent of the column. Let me explain the difference. If you want the percent of the row, we're saying, in this case, that 56% of the Asian students in our school are on track based on the FastBridge MOY assessment. 11% of Asian students in our school are categorized as having some risk based on the FastBridge A reading risk level. So we're taking the percent of this row, which is Asian. If we wanted the percent of the column, that's a little bit different. So a percent of the column would have 100s down at the bottom of the column, 100%. And we would read it to say, of the students that are high risk, a certain percent are Black African American. That's not true in this table because that's not how we set it up. But if we wanted percent of a column, we would be saying this is the group of students. So the high-risk students, of the high-risk students, what percent are Hispanic, multiple race, white, etc., etc. Again, I have this optional filter at the top so that I can move from grade level to grade level. So this is what a summary table or a pivot table will look like for values in SOAR that are categorical in nature. So let's build that. So once again, I'm going to walk us through how to pull data out of OASIS for this purpose. So you'll go to your Wake ID portal, you'll click on your OASIS app, you'll click on DEERS, School Reports, Student Rosters, again because we're building a student roster in Excel. In this case, since my data question has to do with FastBridge data, I'm going to select a middle school. It's important to note Austin Ridge is not the school that I used in my sample data set. And we're going to go down to Student Ad Hoc Report, SOAR. I'm going to click on the diskette. Once again, this held my history from before. I'm going to undo that. In this case, because it's 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and those are the grades that have FastBridge data, I'm actually not going to select a grade level, and that's absolutely fine. But under demographics, once again, I'm going to select student ID, last name, first name, so we can identify students. I'm also going to select grade level, because without that, we can't do that filter to determine which grade level we're summarizing. And I'm going to select ethnicity and race to match the table that I just showed you. Now I'm going to click on assessments because that's where our FastBridge data lives. And if we scroll down, I'm actually going to pull the auto reading risk level MOY and the A reading risk level. You can always select extra just in case you want to do something different once you're in there. And you're going to select Get Report. Again, this will download, and you will either see it in it'll pop up to the right-hand side of your screen or in your Downloads folder. When you do so, you will get something similar to this. Once again, I want to make sure I can read this better. I'm going to select this little triangle in the upper right-hand corner, which will select all my data. I scroll over to the up and down till my cursor turns into this up and down line and double click, and it just makes it easier to see. So as you can see, we have our different grade levels, our different ethnicities, and then we have the result of these students on the auto reading MOY and the A reading MOY for FastBridge. So to create our pivot table, it's going to be just a little bit different. We're going to again select on this triangle in the upper left corner to select all of our data. I'm going to go up and I'm going to insert the pivot table. When I do so, you'll see that the dotted lines surround my data. And again, I'm going to select New Worksheet so that maybe I can name that tab something different or whatnot. But it just starts a clean start to your pivot table. As in Numerical, I'm going to add the grade level to the filters option, the filters box, so that up at the top, I will have the option to selecting what grade level the table is referencing and pulling data from. If you remember our example, our row values are ethnicity, race. It could be whatever your data question is asking. And notice those are pre-populated into our rows. And I'm going to select the A reading in this case. Now, if I do what I did with Numerical and just put it in the sum of values, that gives me a count. That doesn't actually give me the discrete values found in the FastBridge. They're saying we have 2 students with FastBridge data that are American Indian, Alaskan Native, 37 that are Asian, but it doesn't tell me anything about what those scores are. So this is why this is a little bit different than the numerical values. These categorical values also need to be added to the columns field in the pivot table. We didn't use the columns field for our numeric data, but we do need to do that for our categorical data, because that is what sets your columns to the different values that are found, the different discrete values in the FastBridge A reading results. So these are counts, which can be handy in their own right. I am going to go home and center it. Again, it just helps me see things. But these are your counts. One trick about pivot tables when you have counts of students, if I want to know who these 2 Asian students are at high risk are, I could double click on that 2, and you will get their information on a different tab. That can be really helpful as you're trying to identify students who might be in need. I'm going to go back to my pivot table. But in our demonstration, we decided we wanted percents in here. This might be all you want, and then you're done, and that's fine. But what I am going to show you, I'm going to click in my pivot table to get my fields back. So instead of a count, I want those percents. So again, just like in the numerical table, to change what's on the inside, we're going to click this little down arrow in the values pane of our pivot table fields. We're going to click on value field settings. And if we look right here, well, there really isn't an average, or a percent. Sorry, there is an average, what we used a minute ago, but there is a show values as. So if we click on that, which is to the right of the summarized values, so it's right here, show values as, it says there's no calculation, but we want a calculation. We want a percentage. So you can see all of these options. There's a percent of grand total, so a percent of all students, regardless of columns or rows. The percent of column, which I walked through, which would be what percent of students who are high risk are Hispanic, multiple races, or white, or whatever your row labels are. Or to match the table that we showed earlier, the percent of the row. So I'm going to select that, click OK, and you will get your percents. So when we can highlight all of these and move our decimal over again, and there you have our row percents. So this means of the Asian students in our school, 5% are high risk, 19% are low risk, etc., etc. Thank you for watching. We hope you learned something that will help you guide impactful instruction for the students of Wake County. Have a great day.